thing. Sorry, I'm trying to get the patch notes up so I can go over it myself. I won't be as thorough as Drongo. I'll probably just reading them, give my opinion, and then we'll go from there. I meant to do screen capture, by the way. Display capture. There we go. Okay. And obviously, anyone who has questions, I will definitely answer. Okay, so we should have the patch notes here. In the morning, I was watching Fistbur YouTube channel. I was imagining how happy you will be. Oh, yeah. Oh, dude. I couldn't tell you how much I love the Siege changes. And testing it has only made me, I cannot wait for that patch. What conclusions do you have? Siege players will suck now? I don't think Siege players will, well, I can only talk at a high level because that's what I play at for the most part, at a high-ish level. I don't think people like, like BC Cutie, I think is still going to be insanely good. I don't think he's going to be, he wasn't really affected by the last one either, at least not that I recall. What was the result of horsemen killing Trebs? I think it took 7 or 8 horsemen 2 shots on the Trebs, if I recall. What was the result on horsemen killing? Oh wait, I just answered that. Client bug and crash fixes for team games. Since I don't do team games, I really can't talk about that, unfortunately. All right. So for those of you tuning in and are not aware, these are the pub patch notes that are coming out starting sometime later this month or early next month, I would assume. Wham! Is BC gonna have to retire after this? Yes, you know it. You're gonna see a BC retirement post tomorrow. Just kidding. Yeah, they're going to be the patch notes. We're just going to go over them pretty quickly. I'll give you my thoughts on them. I did test some of these before going over the notes, so I kind of don't have to theory craft on some of these things we'll be talking about. So, without further ado, let's just begin. First one is we have the player color picker. You can do this in a ranked mode, skirmish, auto match, quick match, and you can do it. You pick it on the lobby screen. You cannot choose the same color as your opponent in the ranked screen. Drongo tested it, and his opponent tried to pick the same color and got a message saying you cannot, or it's already chosen. So, if you want your color, you have to rush. You have to be like, get that color before your opponent. I think it's actually kind of funny. And I imagine you're going to get some chats about it where someone's going to be like, I can't believe you took my color, or please let me have my color. They have more customizable hotkeys. I'm not really going to go over that because it's just customizable hotkeys. And then we have, let's see, and then the conflicts. Should you wish to disable the conflict alerts, a new toggle has been added called Warn Alerts, which will prevent any new player alerts from appearing when disabled. This is one that, so if you know, when arrows are attacking a building and it gets annoying, you can toggle this on or off in the settings. So this will be a, what's it called? So this is actually going to be useful. You shouldn't get as many false alerts anymore. They also have a map preference system. This looks like it's actually just kind of a veto system of maps you don't want to play. I think in 1v1s you get 3. In auto match or quick match you get 5 options. From looking at it, you just downvote the maps you don't want, and you should, in theory, not get them very often. You may still get them, but I think you're more likely not to get them. So that's going to be kind of nice. I'm really looking forward to that. Dry Rebby only, please. Just kidding. I actually do like a few of them other maps, but it is going to be nice to be able to play maps that I prefer to play, aka not the hybrid maps and not the closed maps, like Hill and Dale or Mongolian Heights. There is a new map as well called The Pit. I didn't look at this map, but I briefly saw it. Looks like there's 3 sacred sites on one side of the map, and I think the relics were over there too, can't recall, and the other players spawned on the other side. I haven't really looked at it too much, so I can't really talk too much about it. They also have a new panoramic camera option, which allows for even greater distance, or zoom distance. At first, I mean, when I first saw it, I wasn't sure I liked it, but as I kind of messed around for an hour, I kind of got used to it, and I actually started liking it. I actually think this is something I'm going to keep when it does go live, but it is different and it does seem a little off at first, but I think if you give it a chance, I think you will end up liking it. At least for me, I like it, I think. We'll see when we actually play 1v1 maps. I think you can't get a downvoted map because it picks from the low ones with the lowest downvotes, and then one ones will always be a map with 0 downvotes. Yeah, I think you may be right. Do you think the new zoom will give you a competitive advantage? Um, I'm going to tell you this. If I'm using this camera mode and BCQD is using the normal camera mode and I beat BCQD in a game, it's not going to be because of the camera. Can I show you the parent? Yeah, I can actually. I'll show the view. I don't know if Drongo showed it, but I'll show the view after this. But I do think it is going to be very useful. Is there anything else to go up here? Nope. All right. And here's actually a change that I do like. Even though I don't play many team games, there's a landmark victories require destroying the landmarks of players who crash, surrendered, or quit. That's actually not what I'm talking about, but we'll go to that in a second. And this is just if a player quits, crashes, or surrenders, their landmarks become neutral but must still be destroyed for a team to claim victory. I actually did not know this was a bug. That is news to me. Black Forest map has... Oh, wait. These are known issues. Let me scroll past this. These are known issues in the current pup. We don't care about that. Shortcuts and remappable keys. Just a bunch of remappable keys. If you want to go over it, you can go over it. I'm not going to go over it, though, because... I don't know. Not much to go over there. And then there's event queue notifications, which is reducing the number of map pings when multiple attacks occur next to each other. Again, that's what I was talking about earlier. When like a Mongol tower rushes you and their arrow slits tower is constantly hitting your wood line or your lumberjack, this will no longer ping you as much. The retrigger time when buildings are attacked is from 0 to 15 seconds. Remove the map ping on upgrade complete. And then ally under attack ping changes from red to blue. And then, yeah. There was another note. I must have missed it, but for those, I'm just going to say it before I go over this section, which is, by the way, this is my favorite part. When I saw these notes, I was salivating. I'm still kind of in. I'm still excited about these changes. And anyway, they also changed it where in team games, all your teammates' landmarks have to be destroyed before you're eliminated from a game. So if you're playing with a friend and someone snipes his landmarks, he is not eliminated from the game until you and the other player are both lose your landmarks. So that'll be kind of nice, I think, for team games, because it is kind of one of my complaints early on was landmark sniping for team games, because how many team games I played in Age of Empires 2 and 3 where I lost my base, I moved to my friend's base, and then we came back and won. So I think that's a cool change for those who love team games. And then I do see some... Yeah, we'll go over the RAM nerf. Alright, so melee versus siege rework. This is going to change a lot. So for the developer note, we wanted to add more strategic considerations to army positioning around siege weapons while increasing realism in the interaction between siege and non-siege units. To accomplish this, we've made all units, except villagers, use their normal weapons versus siege units. That means units other than villagers will not use torches anymore. This means the night charge will be a powerful option versus siege if there aren't any nearby spearmen to brace. Units not using torches mean they will have to get closer to their targets, so it's easier to block them and protect the siege. Of course, we will still want there to be multiple counterplay options to siege, so to get the balance correct with this feature, they've done a huge rebalance in regards to siege health, and to some units like horsemen remain strong, so that units like horsemen remain strong counters by giving their melee attack bonus damage versus siege. This is already, like I've already said this is my favorite change, and I actually really cannot wait for this to come out. So units that attack with melee weapons no longer switch to torches. We just went over that. Villagers continue to use torches against siege and gain +2 damage versus siege. To make sure there's no confusion on that, this is not +2 damage to their normal right now. Right now villagers have +10. This goes to +2. So it's -8. This is actually a nerf to villager torch damage to siege. It still takes the same amount of villagers to kill rams as it does right now pre-patch. So for those who are not confused, we did have clarification on that earlier today from a developer. So we know that that's how that works. Yeah, it's written a little incorrectly. So the ram nerf in terms against villagers is not that bad. Horsemen melee weapons gain +10 bonus damage to siege. Other torches no longer deal bonus damage versus siege, which again makes sense. Villager repair rate of siege units reduced from 20 health a second to 5 a second. I did some testing again with Drongo and Core on this, and this actually did make a difference. For example, 3 horsemen out DPS I think it was 8 villagers, 6 villagers healing a Bombard or a Mangonel. Can't remember what we tested on exactly. It wasn't very much. 4 was noticeable, and then obviously any more it's just going to die. And then part of the reason this was such a dramatic change is that siege weapons now have less health and will take damage slower from infantry armies. Also, it was really good before. I think we can all agree that the healing for siege was way too strong before. Again, a very good change. I think the torch animation was an advantage for the siege owner because you know what unit is focusing the enemy army. Yeah, I would agree with you there, Hunter. Ranged armor increased to 20 for all siege units. Again, this is for things like archers, streltsy, hand cannoneers, and grenadiers as well. This makes it so that even though, which we'll be going over here shortly, the lower health doesn't mean range units will absolutely destroy siege. Bombards and cannons have 30 ranged armor. Siege Works armor bonus increased from 3 to 10. Mongols improved version increased from 4 to 15. Increasing the armor scaling on Siege Works helps to reinforce the resilience of siege to late game range attacks, such as the hand cannoneer. And then reduce the height of trebuchet and defensive cannon projectile trajectories to make them easier to read. Did some testing on this. It is noticeable. I actually like the change. It is still looks a little odd, I guess, but I think it looks good for the most part. Now, here are the changes to siege. Rams health reduced from 700 to 420. Against villagers, this changes nothing. But against knights or melee units, I think they will kill rams faster than they did before. Could be mistaken on that, but that is how it is. Villagers will still do the same amount. Mangonel health reduced from 240 to 140, and the range armor increased to 20. I did test this, and I believe it took one knight 5 or 6 shots with charge to kill a Mangonel. 5 knights with charge, 1 shot a Mangonel. I think anyone who's watched my stream knows how much I've advocated for this kind of change. I think this is an excellent change. I think knights should destroy Mangonels like that. And I think removing the torch damage is also going to make it easier to defend siege in a way with spearmen, but also we'll see how it plays out. I still think it's a fantastic change. Anyone who's watched my stream will not be surprised that I am a big fan of this, especially after testing. If you've ever played Age of Empires 2 or Age of Empires 3, knights kind of work the same way against siege in that game. It was like 4 or 5 hits to kill with 1 knight to kill siege. So I think this is a fantastic change. And Horseman was, I think, 8 to 1-shot a Mangonel with charge. But I could be wrong. I can't remember exact numbers, but it was still a lot lower than it is right now. Springolds were reduced to 125 health, ranged armor to 20. Their bonus damage was reduced from 90 to 50. This is because of the health nerfs, so you don't want to have Springolds doing 90 bonus damage plus, I think it was, I can't remember what it is in general. I think it's 30 plus 90, so you don't want them to one-shot siege, right? So they have to tone that down. Clock Tower Springold health reduced to 190, and then again the ranged armor. Robotoquins, health reduced to 350. Fire armor reduced to 0. And I think that's because fire will never be an issue except by villagers, which if villagers are charging this unit, they're probably going to melt. Melee armor increased from 0 to 10. And then the health reduced to 350. Or the Royal Robotoquin to 350. And then I don't think there's too much else to go over on that one. Culverin's health is down to 220. The damage is increased, so the base damage is increased from 75 to 85. The bonus damage is reduced from 200 to 100. And then the Royal Culverin bonus damage is reduced to 120. And then versus Navy increased from 204 to 240. And then Royal Culverin has 220 health, and then again the same 20 ranged armor. Yeah, did the Robotoquin not have melee armor before? I actually don't know. I don't remember. I never see the unit. So if so, that means it's going to be stronger versus melee units, obviously. Which I think is the developer's goals. And actually, I guess if I read that, it does say it went from 0 to 10. So yes, that is a buff. All right, Bombards. Now this is also a big one. Health reduced to 240. Ranged armor increased to 30. The damage was reduced from 170 to 100. Their bonus damage versus navy and buildings has been increased to 410. The cannon, which I think that's the French one, right? French cannon, 320 to 190, range to 30, damage reduced to 100. And then damage versus naval and buildings is increased from 4 to 500. The Royal Cannon, health is 190, range armor to 30, damage reduced to 120, and then increased to 600 for buildings and naval. These are obviously really huge changes, and I'll go over my siege thoughts on this in just a moment before we move on to the next notes. Trebuchet's health have been decreased to 190, their armor, to 20. I need to just stop saying that's for all siege. The damage was reduced from 100 to 50, and by damage, the base damage. The bonus damage is increased from 200 to 250. So Trebuchet shouldn't do as good versus units like they did before. And the counterweight Trebuchet has 210 health. I just realized, I never realized the counterweight Trebuchet has more health than a normal attraction Trebuchet. Wait. Oh, never mind. I'm being stupid. I'm just going to keep going. So 400 to 210. The damage is reduced from 100 to 50, and then the bonus damage is increased from 450 to 5. And then the clockweight counterweight Trebuchet, 300 health, 20 armor. Yeah, Traction's the Mongol one, by the way, which I realized once I got to the counterweight. I mix those up all the time. And then Nest of Beast health has been reduced from 200 to 140. Ranged armor increased from 8 to 20. The Clock Tower version's 210 health, and then again the armor. Otherwise, nothing has changed. So before we move on to the next section, I just want to go over how big these changes are. I'm sure everyone who's seeing this can already tell that these are huge changes. For starters, like I said, one knight can kill a mangonel in 5 shots. This means spearmen are going to be essential for defending your siege. You're not going to be able to defend with just hand cannoneers and crossbows because knights will... Well, I mean, we'll go over that in just a second. Because knights can still crush them. The one downside to moving to the melee damage, which I don't really count as a downside, I still think it's better, but just want to put it out there, is it is going to be easier to block your siege from cavalry. Right now, cavalry can throw torches, right? So they have a little bit of range damage versus siege, which is now gone. They have to be directly on top of the siege to kill them, which we'll see how that plays out. I still think these are fantastic changes. I'm very curious because I figure it's going to do one of two things. One, siege is going to be useless again, which we all know I'm down for that. Two, siege will be in a good spot. I do not see siege being... I mean, I can't see many people complaining about siege anymore. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm actually wrong all the time. What can I say? But I think this is going to definitely be a very good change for the game. I don't think hiding behind keeps and mass siege is going to be a viable way to play. We'll go over why as we get to the further patch notes here, because there's some other big changes that are going to change the game here. So let's move on. Deer and sheep, which are blocking a building foundation, now move out of the area much, much faster. And they put it as, remember the Mongol TC rush? It's faster than that. Trade ships no longer return additional gold. Instead, they return 100% of the trade value as wood, effectively meaning they get the same amount of gold and wood. And then shorefish and riverfish, they've shrank them so that you reduce the likelihood of stomping out the fish when you place a dock. Villagers will now prefer deer over berry bushes after building a new mill, which I think is a good change. I've always found it funny when I forget that they prefer berries for whatever reason. And then reduce the travel distance. Villagers will scan for new resources after exhausting a stone outcropping, gold vein, or forest. This pretty much means if there's I don't know how much they've reduced it, but instead of your villagers going to a long distance mining another gold mine, you'll find out they're idle earlier instead. This allows you to make a new refinery? No? What are they called? I actually don't know what the building is called where you put your stone and gold, but we'll just skip that for now. I'll remember eventually. As for buildings, units will be able to attack stone wall gates, which are under construction. Once construction is completed, they will no longer be able to. This is just the same as stone walls, but now stone gates have the same feature. And mining camp is what it was called. Wait, where can we find these notes? Patch. Um, Arrow slit emplacements bonus range decreased from +2 to +1. All emplacements are overperforming. We're seeing players build towers near the enemy base first, just to get emplacements for extra firepower. The biggest beneficiary of the arrow slit emplacements has been offensive towers, so we're reducing the range bonus to give players extra breathing room. This is a nice change. I still think tower rushes are going to be strong. I don't think this is that much of a... I mean, I guess I'm not sure without testing this. I feel like tower rushing is still going to be strong, especially as Mongols, but we'll see where that goes. Springald emplacement damage decreased from 60 to 40, and attack speed decreased from 6.25 to 4.5. Developer note, the high range and burst damage on Springald towers makes them extremely powerful. Their low cost makes them spammable. Note that these changes in combination with the increased armor and siege weapons means Springald emplacements are now less cost effective. We'll see. 40 damage is still a good amount, but I don't know if it's... I'm not sure. I feel like tower spam is still going to be probably pretty good. I don't think this is going to change it too much. But hard to say. I mean, 60 to 40 is still a decent nerf, so we'll see how well it is. Maybe it is trash and no one gets a Springald emplacement anymore. Hard to say without actually testing it. This is kind of one of those changes where it's just hard to do without testing, because you can only theory craft on this one. Cannon emplacements damage decreased from 85 to 70. I still think it's going to be very worth spamming cannon towers. Outposts, super strong. We're seeing that more and more lately as players realize how strong Bombard towers are, and I think this is going to still be very strong. But we'll see again. And then their developer note, cannon emplacements deal 100% of their damage in AoE around the initial target. We wanted to retain this cool feature while making them less effective for single targets like Bombards. Big loss for the core Mongol FFA special. You know, will it be almost impossible to raid a well-defended wonder now? Not sure what you mean by that. If anything, this would make it a little easier. Buildings that cost exclusive... Now, this is a big one. Buildings that cost exclusively stone, keeps, stone wall towers, stone walls, stone wall gates now cost stone to repair instead of wood. Now, think about that for a second. Right now, if you make a keep and you repair that with villagers, it takes wood, which is a very plentiful resource. Not anymore. If you do not have stone, you will not be able to infinitely repair your keep. I think this was a greatly needed change. Very happy the developers are adding this. And just as a note, landmark keeps still use wood because it's a landmark. So I should add that out because someone in chat just asked. So landmarks will still use wood, but keeps themselves will require stone. I think this is going to be very interesting to see how this changes the game, because now players are not going to be able to put an offensive keep and then repair it forever because you need stone. So what I think this will do to the game is I imagine more people will make outposts, and I think keeps might die down. I don't think you'll see as many keeps, which could be a negative or a positive depending on how you view them. It may be a good idea to maybe buff keeps in response to this. I'm not sure. It's too soon to say without seeing how it plays out. But from looking at this right now, though, this is a pretty big nerf to like aggressive keeps, and I think it's really, really good. Pretty much you need to have stone now to repair, so you want to almost always be mining stone. And now for the relic limit on all monasteries and landmarks that act as monasteries set to 3. I don't know if I said that correctly, so just to specify that, make that clear. So the relic limit on all monasteries and landmarks can now only put 3. You cannot put 5 in one, regardless if it's a normal monastery or a landmark. And the reasoning is this adds an additional cost to players who get more than 3 relics and want to keep garrisoning them for extra gold. It also makes the HRE power of garrisoning and keeps towers more valuable. We'll go more into that later. Keep landmarks now correctly activate a new weapon for their garrison slots. All town centers now correctly activate a new weapon for each of their garrison slots. I'm going to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but they now activate a new weapon, I guess. The pup is out now, so you could play these changes on the public server. On the official server, we have no official date, but my assumption would be by July would be my guess. I don't know if they're going to do it on a Friday or what, but Season 2 would be my assumption. Alright, food deposit buildings can now be placed closer to fish resources and shallow water. I'm assuming this makes it so that obviously you can gather the fish closer to a mill. And then stone wall health when under construction begins reduced from 10% to 1%. So from what I understand, the wall health will now be at 1% of its original health when it first starts. Their intention is that an enemy army would be able to tear down a stone wall that is constructed right under its nose. This change is a step in the right direction, but we've got future plans to ensure stonewalling is a proactive strategy and not reactive. What they mean by that is they want you to stonewall beforehand, not, oh, I see units coming my way, let's stonewall now. That's what they mean by that. Units. Units with activated abilities will now be able to activate their ability from within a mixed multi-selection. I'm pretty sure what they mean here is if you have units that have used the ability, you can still use it on the ones that don't have it if they're in the same selection. In H2 would mean the more villages you had in a TC equals more arrows. Okay. Normalize all naval units to have the same target priority. Naval units will no longer prefer to hit buildings like docks when there are still enemy boats in their range. A good change, I would say. Spearmen performing the spear wall animation faster and do not trigger their spear wall unit charging cavalry is closer. Is that me? That might make sense. Spearmen perform the spear wall animation faster and do not trigger their spear wall until charging cavalry are closer. Okay, yeah, I think I just said that wrong. This reduces the instance where spearmen would spear wall behind friendly troops, makes the spear wall more responsive, and gives you more time to move your units so they spend less time in the spear wall animation. I do think this is a good change. There are some occasions where this has been very annoying, where you're trying to move your spearmen forward and then they go, they kind of put this and then they stop, and then you lose units or you lose something because your spearmen decided to take a nap. Grenadier damage decreased from 15 to 13, weapon range decreased from 4 to 3, AoE fall-off damage reduced from 100% 75-50 to 166-33. And then their reasoning, in addition to having no unit counters from the core unit roster, Grenadiers also deal great damage to buildings. These stat tweaks make them a bit less cost-effective and create a bigger risk when damaging buildings. Horseman armor scaling increased from 1222 to 1234. This increases the late game scaling of the unit when there are more buildings blocking pathing and there is less surface area to fight versus large masses of ranged units. I think it's a fine change. Horsemen always feel kind of meh to me, even though they're actually pretty good in certain situations. But I think it's a good change. The monk train time reduced from 45 to 30 seconds, and these changes are aimed at getting more religious units out on the battlefield and involved in combat. This is a bit of a buff, right, for all civilizations. For example, the Rus Fast Castle, they can get a relic 15% or 15 seconds faster than they can now. I don't really have any feelings about it. Don't really care. Fixed an issue where units using attack move wouldn't prioritize defensive landmarks. And then a transport ship help text updated to highlight that the ship will use the line of sight of units inside its garrison. And then miscellaneous changes. We kind of talked about this earlier. Landmark victory condition in team games updated so that players will only be eliminated when all allied landmarks are destroyed. Fantastic change, and I am really glad they did it. Even though I personally don't play many team games nowadays, I still think it's an excellent change. Slowed down the projectile speed of cannons, culverin, and hand cannon slits so the projectiles can be seen with the human eye. I did see this in a bit of testing, and you can notice the change. But it doesn't actually change anything, so you don't have to worry about that. Herbal medicine technology cost reduced from 350 gold to 275 gold, and research time from 60 to 45 seconds. The Delhi version research time is increased from 180 to 225. I wish they just removed this technology. End of story. The only civilization that benefits from herbal medicine is Delhi, and that's because of their elephants. We'll go more into that when we get to the Delhi patch notes. Siege engineering technology research time reduced from 60 to 45 seconds. And the reasoning is as the path that utilizes this technology is long in the early game, In some cases, the window of opportunity was closed before ramps could be utilized. We've sped this up a touch to give more aggressive options early. I am okay with this change. I think it's fine. It's just going to mean... Okay, can you hear me now? Let me make sure you guys can still hear me. Okay, sorry, my headphones turned off for some reason. Anyway, what I was going to say is... what was I going to say? Oh, right. So Rams can attack you 15 seconds faster. I think this is a fine change. I have no complaints about this at all. I don't think it's going to be too strong. Now, this is a cool one. Professional Scouts drop carcass command can now be queued before holding a carcass. So that means, if I'm understanding this correctly, you can right-click a deer and right-click it back home without actually having the deer selected or picked up. So just a little quality of life change there. And then fixed an issue where units using attack move when... Didn't I just read that? Okay. All right, so now for some other fun stuff. Changes, the civilization specific. The Abbasid dynasty. The mill influence range increased +1 tile to allow for easy connections to the House of Wisdom's influence. Fine change. Camel barding has been renamed to Camel Rider barding. I think this is an excellent change. I'm a little worried Abbasid might be overpowered with that change, but I think it's excellent. Spice roads, and I'm just kidding. Spice roads technology now correctly increases trade ship gold income by 30%. Traders and trade ships will now correctly return 25% secondary resources after researching Grand Bazaar. Preservation of knowledge technology no longer applies twice to text research in the House of Wisdom. I didn't know it ever did. Field constructed mangonels and springolds now have the correct hotkeys in the construction menu. A good change. Camel archers can now be selected with select military hotkeys. Didn't know they couldn't now. And an incendiary arrow visual is no longer lost when composite bows is upgraded. Short story, Abbasid isn't getting really buffed or nerfed. The only buff was the mill influence range, but I really don't think Abbasid is changing that much. Except for, the siege changes that we mentioned earlier, but that's for all civs. Alright, now we got China. This one I can already tell you is going to be controversial among many players. And we'll just go straight to it. So the Fire Lancer move speed is increased from 6 to 6.5. They have more plans for the Fire Lancer in the future, but for now this was just an easy one to help fit into its intending rating role. No idea what other future buffs they're going to do. Fire Lancer time between attacks reduced from 1.75 to 1.62. Again, just some... So you're going to see a lot of attacks reduced, and that's because they made some back-end changes to attack speeds, which resulted in some units attacking slightly slower. This change helps set the unit back to its original strength. So this is not a buff to the unit. This is actually just making it do the same as before with whatever back-end changes they made. The Pyrotechnics only affects hand cannoneers instead of all gunpowder units. The weapon range bonus changed from plus 20% to plus 1.5 tiles, and the cost has been reduced from 1,000 to 500 resources. Chinese were stacking bonuses onto their gunpowder units, creating super units like the Clock Tower Bombard that is too good in too many roles. Focusing Pyrotechnics just on the hand cannoneers allows it to stand out from other hand cannoneers and lets us buff some of the other unique gunpowder technologies like reload drills. Reload drills attack speed increased from 25% to 33%. This is the power level increase to help offset the loss of Pyrotechnics. And the tooltip is slightly incorrect here as it still refers to reload speed instead of attack speed. The Nest of Bees and all Clock Tower Siege units are included in the... Oh yeah, that's just the Siege nerfs. The Granary cost reduced from 250 wood to 150 wood. I think this is a good change. It's like an expensive mill. 250 is a very high cost to ask when transitioning to farms. And then this lower cost is also made with the 10% increase to gathering rates that this building provides. Barbican of the Sun changes. Now has the ability to purchase the Springald and Cannon emplacement. That is correct. That means in the Castle Age, you can add a Springald to this bad boy, or in the Imperial Age, you can add a cannon emplacement. That's just to make the landmark better, or scale better in the late game. I think it's a fine change. The Great Wall Gatehouse landmark changes. No longer provides damage bonuses to units locally around the landmark. No longer provides bonus health to stone walls and gates. Now comes with a nest of bees emplacement that fires a burst of 16 arrows. Now provides all your units on stone walls with plus 25% range damage. This landmark has completely changed. For those who are unaware, this is the Stone Gate Imperial landmark for China. So that just completely changes its role a little bit. And then the reason they made the change was because the Great Wall Gatehouse led to a passive style of gameplay that relied on building a huge massive stone walls that took too long to get through. We've refocused the gameplay around making the placement of the buildings impactful and encouraging combat on and around walls. I did see Drongo test this a little bit, so it is a little... it does fire 16 and it does damage. I actually think it's going to be it'll be great for defending your villagers, right? You can place this around somewhere in your base to protect like your farm eco. It's probably going to be very good. The Spirit Way Landmark changes. Spirit Way Landmark no longer reduces the cost of dynasty units in stables and archery ranges around the landmark. The Spirit Way Landmark now houses dynasty technologies, which can be researched for minus 50% cost and plus 100% research speed, so you get half off, and it researches twice as fast. When a dynasty unit dies, nearby units will receive plus 20% attack speed and plus 20 health over 10 seconds. This is actually a very interesting change. I'm not sure if I like it or not. Pretty much, yeah, so if like for example, let's say you have a hand cannoneer and you have a Zuganu or Chokanu, or whatever you want to call it, and that Chokanu dies, that hand cannoneer will actually heal 20 health and it'll attack 25% faster. And it does, and each dynasty unit that dies extends the duration. So it's 10 seconds, but if you lose, let's say 2 seconds pass and you lose another Chokanu, then it refreshes back to 10 seconds. And this does it in combat no matter where you are. You could be at your opponent's base. You can be on an island by yourself. This is a strong change. We'll see how it plays out. I'm not sure if I think it's... I wouldn't be surprised if it's too strong, but it may not. Who knows, right? It's a little too soon to say. Because you guys have to remember, China late game did get nerfed pretty heavily. Their Bombards are no longer, I would say, overpowered. I would say the same with Grenadiers. So, hard to say how this will play out. I'm not a big fan of it. I think plus 20% attack speed is okay. I just think the healing part I'm not a fan of, though, the most. In general, I don't like healing in combat for a variety of reasons. So I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out, Blade. You can now stack the Dynasty Death buff with the normal Stonewall buff and the Great Wall buff. Yeah, you could. Yes, and it does trigger on a manual delete. So you can delete your own unit to get the buff for this plus 20% attack speed and plus 20% health. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, this is a late game scenario situation. China in general struggles in the early game the most, I would say. Well, not the most out of any save, I mean in general. Their early game is fairly weak, especially compared to their late. So we'll see how it does. But like I said, I'm not a fan of the healing. I do not like the healing. Scouts now keep their Tang Dynasty bonus vision when advancing to the next age, and then the Ming Dynasty bonus no longer increases the health of keeps, stonewall towers, and outposts. Alright, so for what I'm just going to say in regards to China, I don't play the Civ very much. I've never been a fan of the design of China. I don't like turtling, getting a bunch of siege, and playing it out. From my initial thoughts, China might need a buff in the early game. Maybe make the feudal age dynasties a little cheaper. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how to balance China. I don't play the Civ. I don't really have many ideas, and frankly, I'm not invested into China. So for me personally, I let them do whatever. As long as they're not overpowered, I don't care. Not the best attitude to have probably, but that's how my thought process is in regards to China. It just doesn't... I don't think the Civ will ever be fun for me to play, kind of like Delhi, but we'll go into that in a moment. The Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultanate Imperial Age Tech Time multiplier reduced from 15 to 12x. Delhi-free Imperial technologies provide a gigantic amount of gold, but that doesn't matter if you die before the research completes. We've knocked the values to find a median point between time and savings. When toggling the Palace of the Sultan Landmark's automatic elephant production off, elephants in queue will now be correctly cancelled. Technology research time adjustments. Boiling oil increased from 300 to 450 seconds. All-Seeing Eye increased from 135 to 157. Swiftness increased from 270 to 450. Professional Scouts increased from 210 to 262. Survival Techniques decreased from 225 to 135. That's actually a pretty big decrease there. And then Herbal Medicine increased from 180 to 225. The Hisar Academy landmark no longer generates food while under construction. Didn't know it did that. The Textiles technology now increases food produced by the Hisar Academy. Tower Elephant range units are now properly affected by all damage upgrades. So elephants got a buff because that's what they needed. And then the Dome of Faith landmark changed from minus 50% cost to minus 40% cost and plus 50% production speed. This is not actually a buff. These changes keep Dome of Faith at the same power level in spite of the new decreases in Scholars train time. So this landmark actually got a nerf. It got a minus 10% cost, so it's 40% off instead of 50, but the production speed is still the same. What are my thoughts on this? I'm frankly disappointed with the Delhi changes. I think Delhi in general needs a rework as a civ. I just think they're a very one-dimensional civ in the game. I think most players would agree with this. What does Delhi do every game? Feudal Age, get the sacred sites, get the castle, mass scholars, mass elephants, try to kill your opponent. That's pretty much what the game comes down to for Delhi. That's what their goal is: get a lot of elephants, a lot of scholars, keep drop you, which actually may not be as viable now, we'll see, and then use the OP scholar healing ability with Herbal Medicine to keep the elephants from dying. I personally think Delhi, that they just need a complete rework in some ways. I don't know how it would be done, and I'm not here to provide my thoughts on that in general of how I would do it, but I still think Delhi is going to be too overpowered in the Castle Age with elephants and scholar healing. I don't know how their Imperial Age is going to be with this time multiplier reduced. But, I mean, like I said, Tower Elephants got a buff, so they're even stronger in Castle Age now. So, unfortunately, we'll see what they do. But I do think Delhi needs some touching up because they are the most, out of all the civilizations in the game, Delhi is the most one-dimensional. They're just very, you just know what they're going to do. They're just very standard. All the other civs have multiple kind of strategies they can do, but Delhi doesn't really. They went so hardcore with Delhi and China, it's going to take them like 5 years to balance them. I mean, it's not an easy job to balance 8 civs that are pretty different, right? So I don't blame them for not being able to. I just think that Delhi needs a lot of touching up because they're just too one-dimensional, and I don't think that's going to change. Hopefully, sometime down the road, we do get a Delhi rework or something. But let's move on to English. English Naval Civilization bonus and unique technology swapped. Shipwrights renamed to Admiralty. Admiralty now provides +1 range to all English combat ships. English now has a global discount to all naval ships of 10%. It was a pretty big tempo loss to spend all the time and resources to get shipwrights, so we rolled it into the base stats for the Civ. This should also help English on water maps as their main economic advantage is extra food. Windguard Palace Landmark has 2 new production options. Windguard Raiders spawns an army of 3 knights and horsemen, and also has an option to spawn 3 hand cannoneers and crossbowmen. I'm pretty sure they're not removing the trebuchet option, so this is just a buff to the Windguard in general. Still think it's, I mean, the Windguard's still a very good landmark. It's actually better now, so I can't imagine using these very often, but we'll see. I think every civ is one-dimensional other than Delhi. I don't know how you can say that, and I don't know. I don't know how you can think that. I think they're very one-dimensional. I mean, Delhi has one strategy, and that's all they do every game. Every other civ has a bunch of other strategies, I feel like. Hey, Blade, thank you for doing this. Hey, no problem, Dino. Someone said they thought they removed the original one. I mean, the way they word it is, it sounds like it's adding, right? Windguard Palace Landmark has 2 new production options. So it's not saying only 2 options, it's saying 2 new ones. So that makes me think that the so the trebuchet one should still be there. And then the Abbey of Kings landmark changes. Radius increased from 6.25 to 7.5 tiles. I don't know if I mean, when I sigh like that, I just mean I don't know what they can do to make the Abbey of the Kings good, in my opinion. I just don't see how. It just seems like no matter what they do, I don't feel like that landmark's ever going to be so good. All right, let's move on to French. So, the Royal Institute discount increased from 20% to 30%. And their note is, while we are seeing this landmark in some matchups, we like it to be more competitive with the Guild Hall. While I understand the reasoning for this, I do find it a bit funny that we're seeing a lot more players in tournaments and whatnot. And this is very recent. I'm sure this change was done well before people started doing this, but we are seeing the Royal Institute used more often. Um, Even before this buff, we've been seeing people more use it. In the Puppy Paw versus Wham show match yesterday, we saw we saw the Royal Institute used. In the Red Bull Wololo qualifiers, we saw the Royal Institute used quite a bit. So it is kind of funny. I think it's just they're trying to buff this right because they want to make it more useful. It's just funny that it actually is starting to get more use before. But again, this change was done well before this. I don't know. I don't know my thoughts on this. I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, obviously it's not bad. But when I say bad, I don't know if it's bad for or too good or not. We'll find out. What's the French 2 H4 landmarks again? I don't remember. The Red Palace and then the College of Artillery, as Captain said. Alright, and then the Red Palace default weapons decrease from 3 to 2 Arbalest. We want the main power of the Red Palace to come from adding units to activate its powerful garrison weapons. This allows for more counterplay if you can kill nearby villagers or attack when the enemy army is on another part of the map. You think it's where they start buffing it after it's starting to be a viable option? Do remember that these changes were probably done well before people started using it for the Royal Institute. So yeah. The College of Artillery's Royal Siege units are included in the... Oh yeah. Chamber of Commerce was given no bonus to trade value. It now gives the proper 30%. Wow. French trade ship bonus changed from plus 20% gold to plus 20% all resources on trades. Alright, now let's go to HRE. So, the Holy Roman Empire. Some will consider this a nerf, some will consider this a buff. I'm not sure which I am, but we'll go over this. The Regnitz Cathedral landmark now provides plus 100% gold from all captured relics instead of 200% gold from 2 relics garrisoned within it. To tell you what that means, so instead of providing 300 gold per relic, it's 200 gold, but it does not have to be in the Regnitz Cathedral. You heard me correctly. You can now put a relic in a keep, in a tower, in a dock, and you're going to get that same plus 100% gold. So this is, some people are saying it's a buff because now you need more relics to equal the amount of gold income. I consider it a buff. Funnily enough, I think Hut said this a long time ago that he wants the Regnants to be plus 100% gold and then allow 5 relics inside. They kind of took that, except now it just adds it to keeps and outposts. So in theory, if you capture all 5 relics, you get 1,000 gold per minute instead of the capped out 800 that it is now. Wait, is it 800 or 900? Yeah, 900 now. So it's a slight buff, I would say. So, like I said, some people don't like it. I think it's a great change, and we'll see how that goes from there. Their reasoning for this change was to HRE to engage more frequently with their mechanic to garrison relics and defensive buildings to power them up. And then someone in chat, imagine playing in team games FFA and have 10 relics. That is true. You get a lot of relics, and that's an omega buff for team games. And actually probably a buff for FFA if you can get more than 5 relics. Although that's hard to do. The HRE prelates will now inspire units when they start healing. This makes the inspired warrior tech more valuable and means healing damaged villagers has a smaller hit to your economy. The Minework Palace landmark discount and research speed increased from 30% to 40%. I don't think this really matters that much. No one's not making the landmark because of 30%. It's just very situational. Now, the Akin Chapel landmark now accepts the drop-offs of all resources. This is another buff to HRE, because now you can place farms right against that landmark, and your villagers will drop it off. Farms, wood, food, gold, which is what farms are. So the landmark now acts as a universal drop-off of resources. Pretty big buff, I would say. It makes the farm economy a little bit stronger for HRE as well. And then they fixed a gross bug where Dark Age and Fuel Age prelates were only healing for 3.5 per second instead of the intended 7. So it looks like the Delhi version of prelate or healing was supposed to work, is not a bug when they heal faster than the other civs, I guess, or at least the prelates. So in general, I think the change. I actually like these changes. I think I don't think I have really any complaints about any of these changes at all for HRE. HRE might potentially be a top 3 civ now. Who knows? We'll find out in the update. I think people are arguing that they might be top 3 now. I don't know if I agree with that though. But they're definitely very good changes to HRE. I think HRE is going to be in a very good spot after this patch. And now for the lovable Mongols, the civilization that has held #1 winning statistics at the high level for like 6 to 7 months. Mangadai time between attacks reduced from 1.38 to 1.25. This is again not a buff to the unit. This is actually just a change because of some back-end changes to attack speed to stop it from attacking slower. So this is not a buff to the Mangadai. The Traction Trebuchet unit and the improved Siege Works research are included in the Melee vs Siege Rework. I'll get to that in a second, SRA. Improved Economy Technologies. Bonus of the improved Economy Technologies increased from 5 to 7.5. The Kurultai landmark changes. The Kurultai area radius is changed from 4 to 7.5 tiles. The healing effect no longer requires the Khan to be present with its aura. For those who are unaware of what this landmark is, this is the other landmark that Mongols had that instead of the step readout, which provides all that extra gold, this allows your units to heal when they're in the radius. Think of it as a better version of Abbey of Kings because it can move. And it doesn't require the Khan anymore. So this is a lot stronger of a landmark. Do I think this is going to make Mongol players choose this over step readout? I don't think it will, but we'll find out. Mongols now have access to geometry and geometry improved technologies in the Siege Workshop. Improved Tith Barns now generates the correct amount of resources, and then packed pastures and barracks now have the same health as their unpacked versions. Alright, and the last civilization in the game, which actually has some pretty big changes, by the way. The Rus. The Horse Archer time between attacks reduced from 2.612 to 2.125. This is not a buff. Same thing as before. Attack speeds change. So it's the same as it is right now. It's not a buff. The Spazskaya Tower landmark now unlocks the building of stone walls. You heard that correctly. The Rus can now build stone walls if they build the Spazskaya Tower landmark. For those who are not sure what landmark this is the keep landmark for Imperial Age. So you, instead of the siege one, I don't even actually, the high tower? What's the other one called? High tower? I don't remember what it is, but the other one provides minus 20% to siege. This one now unlocks stone walls. I don't know if this is going to be used or not in 1v1s. I'm sure it will. Some players will for sure. Me personally, I feel like I'll still probably go for the High Armory, which is the name as someone in chat just gave, because it's because I still think cheaper siege will be better, but then maybe not, right? Maybe it will be better to go for the stone walls. We'll see. We'll see which way this goes. I did just remember about the siege nerfs, so perhaps actually this might be the way to go. We'll see. The Kremlin Landmark changes. The Kremlin influence range increased from 4 to 8 tiles. The weapon range increased from 6 to 8. The garrison era range increased from 6 to 8. These changes should allow for more flexible placement to get the Kremlin in a good defensive position while also providing a bonus to wood gather rates. Okay, so let's think about this real quick. It's supposed to be a defensive landmark. What do we think might happen from this? My guess is we're going to see some people try to Kremlin rush. Now, it's not as good as the Chinese Barbican rush because the Chinese build their landmarks faster and everything, but I'm sure we're going to see some people try to Kremlin rush, and it is going to be kind of interesting to see. I don't know. I still think the Golden Gate's the better option, and I don't think most players, at least at the high level, will go this landmark. Could be wrong, though. This could be really good on water maps, though. So, like, the Kremlin could actually be very viable on water maps instead of the Golden Gate, but I don't know if I would use it otherwise. We'll see. It's hard to say without, like, again, it's just theory crafting, right? High Trade House landmark changes. Fix the aura indicator on the High Trade House to represent the correct tree counting range. The area is now visually bigger, but it's the same as it was pre-patch. And then the Lodia attack ships now retain their plus 8 damage versus incendiary ships, and then Lodia ships were scaling to different sizes. They're all normalized. So Esray, this is what I was talking about, by the way, for Mongols being number 1. I just wanted to show you real quick. 53% at the, obviously this counts platinum, but still, Mongols is still number 1 statistically wise. So I did get back to your question. Just wanted to let you know this is what I was talking about earlier. I guess also to YouTube if you were curious. All right. So, lots of changes. This is a huge patch. I mean, the game is going to change. The game is going to be played completely differently when this patch comes out. I cannot wait for the patch. I think overall, what are my thoughts on the patch? I think it's excellent changes all around the board. Everything I have complained about has almost been addressed. What were the things I complained about a lot? Siege and static defense. So like I said, I think these are amazing changes. I'm very curious how it's going to look, and we'll look at the new map here in just a moment. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts. I love the siege changes. I think it's gonna the game's just gonna be played very differently. Units are going to be a lot stronger because mass siege. What are your thoughts on team game change? I think the team game change is very, very good. I disliked that you could eliminate an ally by sniping their landmarks. As someone who's used to love team games, when I played Age of Empires 2 and 3, I used to spam them all the time. I lost my base all the time. I'd move to my ally's base, and then I would rebuild, and we'd win from there sometimes. There was a lot. I really disliked that it wasn't that way before. So I think it's a good change. I was terrible with siege and against static defense, so I'm going to be OP in this patch. You know what, MPAG? This is a buff to me too. What does Cast Valve have a point on? And we'll launch the game to show you some of the changes, by the way. And then we're going to go to ranked ladder. So let's remove this browser source now. We don't need it anymore. Exit this. And we're going to launch the pup here. Ram push is already kind of uncommon at high levels. I think they'd have to switch more to the Muslim style of playing with either towers or the fast